Harvey Milk was an American politician, and he was the first openly gay official in the history of California as a politician, and he lost his life for the cause of justice, inclusion, equity, and living out loud. And as Susan and I were having conversation around Lent and our theme and emotions, this song came to mind as far as it relates to the emotion of anger. And I wondered, what is the opposite of anger? Is the opposite of anger love? Is the opposite of anger peace and compassion? What is the opposite of anger? I am finding myself right now in the culture in which we live, in the thick of a lot of emotions, one of them being anger, one of them being numbness, if you can call that an emotion, another one, compassion, and another one, an incredible amount of frustration. I'm angry that there seems to be this created crisis of dangerous migrants that are crossing our borders. And Susanna, I so much appreciated your message this morning. I'm angry because there seems to be a rise in white nationalism in our country. I'm angry because we can't seem to make headway, and Maddie, I think you were instrumental in bringing the group here advocating for gun reform. We can't seem to really make any headway, and yet New Zealand immediately took action after the shooting at the Christchurch Mosque, and we heard this quote from the Prime Minister: "There will be changes to our gun laws." And then women, how long do you need to wait? Do we need to wait for ERA to be passed? And religion? That's a whole other angry-making issue for me. Narrow-minded, angry Christians who have this judgmental father that lives somewhere in the sky just waiting to smite anybody who doesn't follow their particular brand of faith. So I know I'm supposed to help you find joy today, but I'm going to talk a lot more about anger, and we're going to sing about love. So if we're brutally honest, most of us probably have enough anger to go around, right? And we often reserve, the strange thing about anger is I think we often reserve our severest wrath for those that we love the most. No one can infuriate us quite like our spouses, our partners, our closest friends, our parents, our children. And as a result, uncontrolled anger is perhaps the number one cause of death for relationships. In a popular song that I was told not to share, a rap song by Eminem, we hear these lyrics. You ever love somebody so much you can barely breathe when you're with them? You swore you'd never hit them, never do nothing to hurt them. Now you're in each other's faces spewing venom. You push, you pull each other's hair. Eminem's observation echoes the view of Christian thinkers like Kierkegaard and C.S. Lewis, who said this. They claim that many forms of love quite naturally and regularly turn to anger and to hatred and to jealousy and all different sorts of negative attitudes and emotions. So I ask myself this morning, is anger always bad? Is anger a bad emotion? And as people of faith, we often go back to Jesus in the temple with his whip, and we say, look, Jesus himself got angry. You think about those money changers in the temple and how Jesus was speaking truth to power. And actually, as I was reading this particular periodical for the message this morning, from Baylor University, that is one of my favorite periodicals, the story of Jesus cleansing the temple is not necessarily an expression of anger. It is rather an incident of well-managed outrage. In fact, the Gospel of John calls it all-consuming zeal. not anger, but all-consuming zeal, because of an oppressive religious system that now found its place in the very temple of God. Jesus knew how to be indignant. Jesus knew how to be irate. Jesus, I think, even knew how to be furious, but without the slightest trace of derision, contempt, or abuse. Anger can be an adaptive response in the face of injustice and unfair treatment. So when the United Methodist Church made the announcement of not allowing LGBTQI clergy in their denomination and sticking with the Methodist Book of Discipline and even in tightening their stance on LGBT folks, Redeem sent me a text that said, "I am so angry with the United Methodist Church right now." And initially I responded, "Redeem, don't be angry. I'm used to homophobia in the church, nothing new. It's not really going to affect me." And then I rethought what I was going to say in my response to him, and I believe I texted back, "Redeem, thanks for being angry for my issues, because I'm angry for your issues as a young black man and as my brother on the journey." And we share anger for each other's issues. Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesus showed us how to work for justice and how to work for fairness without letting anger eat us alive and without lashing out in unproductive, violent ways. So let us be gentle, angry people. We are peaceful, loving people. We are singing for our lives. That's actually Holly Neer and a few other folks in a UCC church, strangely enough, I believe in Madison, Wisconsin. The truth is, though, I often find myself paralyzed by fear, and Holly would say this, and I would agree, because it seems like injustice is rolling down the hill at speeds unmeasured right now. And that's got me scared. And actually, I'm not sleeping well at night, and every morning at 3 a.m. I wake up a little bit sweaty with a little bit of anxiety, because I wonder, how do I lead our community? And how do I bring that joy and that peace and that justice back to our community? So Holly Neer's song wants me to stop being paralyzed with fear at 3 a.m. in the morning and get back in the game. Okay. There's one thing about love, though, that I learned also from Holly Neer as I had a conversation with her after she sang this in Madison, Wisconsin. It was, love is not a passive state. It is an active force, and it is the force of the soul. And what I think is unique about love and anger is they both are forces of the soul, are they not? Because they kind of show what resides within us and what comes out of us. Pastor Susan said last week, "My emotions change like the weather." Was that your personal reflection? Sure. Well, Pastor Susan and I are on the same page because my emotions change with the weather, especially lately. We have that in common. And I think these emotions of love and anger can change on a dime. But the emotion of anger, everybody knows the feeling of anger. And sadly enough, I think sometimes we know the feeling of anger more than we know the feeling of love, the emotion of love. Anger is a corrosive emotion that can run off with a person's mental and physical health. Is holding anger in a solution? Is letting anger out a solution? Anger doesn't dissipate just because it's unleashed or held in. Anger is considered one of those basic emotions along with happiness and sadness and anxiety and disgust and empathy and apathy. Researchers posit that these emotions have served as protective for us as human beings throughout the long course of human history. And in particular, I believe Pastor Susan also shared this, but anger is related to the fight, flight, or freeze. So as I was prepping this message on the emotions of anger and love, I also remember this friend of mine who is an activist who once said, "Anger is the result of love. It is energy for defense of something you love when it is threatened." Redeem, out of his love for this middle age trending toward old age, white preacher felt that my rights were being threatened. And out of love for Redeem, as a young black man who feels that he needs to wear a suit out in public so he's not considered one of those hoodie-wearing young black men. So out of respect and love for him, that's part of why I wear this button every week, because his black life matters as a young black man. So who or what do you love so much that you feel anger when their rights or their lives or their hearts or their thoughts or their bodies are threatened? So let's get to the sacred reading finally about Mary. And I think, Pastor Susan, you had no clue how I was going to tie this in, did you? Zero. It's Lent. And we can make an incredible tie. So the modern English version of this Luke reading that was read for us this morning says, "Then Simon blessed Joseph and Mary and the child and said to Mary his mother, 'Listen, this child is destined to cause the fall and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign which will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. And Mary, a sword will pierce through your own soul too.'" That is not what a mother wants to hear before the birth of her child. Would you agree? And then we are told, "But Mary, Jesus' mother, kept and pondered all of these words in her heart." Can you imagine the emotions that filled the heart of Mary when Simon said, "Your son, this baby, will be the downfall of many. He will be a source of contention. And in fact, Mary, this child, his life, your firstborn, is going to bring you pain. Pain that only a mother for a child can understand. It's going to be like a sword thrust into your heart. But Mary, your firstborn son is also going to bring incredible joy and incredible freedom and incredible liberation to many, many, many more." So what love Mary must have had for her firstborn son, along with probably a million plus questions. Why my son? Why did my son have to be chosen to be the prophet that would die? Why is it my son that had to be the rebel and the zealot and speaking truth to power to these political powers of the Romans? And why was it my son that had to speak truth to the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Couldn't you pick another one? Standing by the cross of Jesus, the second part of the story, Mary and his mother's sister, another Mary, wife of Cleophas, and another Mary, Mary Magdalene, the three Marys at the foot of the cross. When Jesus sees his mother and the disciple whom he loves standing nearby, he says to his mother, Jesus says this, "Woman, here is your son." And then he said to the disciple that was there, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, we are told the disciple took her into his own home. So with Mary, I stand at the foot of the cross, and I am filled with love, but I'm also filled with anger. I'm filled with anger for a man who lived his life, including all of those who were othered. Love for a man who brought the spiritual words of the Old Testament to life for me. Love for a man who liberated and preached freedom to thousands upon thousands, and 2,000 years later, his message still resonates. I'm reminded that although Jesus was executed 2,000 years ago, every day Jesus is being persecuted and crucified anew by the victims of violence across our globe, and by our immigrant refugees coming across the border, in mosques, in our schoolrooms, In the privatized prison systems in our country, Jesus is being crucified and persecuted. Jesus dies 1,000 deaths each day out of intense love and maybe some anger for those who disregard human lives. I recognize that we are all, at one point or another, at the foot of the cross with Mary. Maybe it's a loved one in a hospital room. Sometimes we're alone because, life is filled with crosses. Crosses that sometimes we bear well and crosses that sometimes drop us to the ground. Like Pastor Susan mentioned last week, this image, we need somebody to assist us, a Simon, a Simonette. Because life is a constant cycle of death and rebirth. Our politics are a constant cycle of death and rebirth. Our world is a constant cycle of death and rebirth, coming alive over and over and over again to all of the range of human emotions. Anger and love, joy and pain, empathy and apathy, courage and fear. And while my range of emotions and your range of emotions may not be as deeply felt as Mary's, although those of you who have lost a child would probably concur that your emotions were just as deep, if not deeper, I face the same emotions with the flood of our current reality in our world. I have deep sadness because of the sufferings of those who are physically near and far from me. Compassion as I meet people who live in fear because of their ethnicity, their immigration status, or their faith traditions. Anger as I see some individuals who are supposed to be serving us in civil leadership positions with apparent blindness and greed and fear and hardness of heart. And I also have that emotion of powerlessness because I feel so small relative to all the issues I see. And yet, I trust a loving God that has seen me through all of the emotions of life. I gain strength in knowing that Redeem, a young black man, and me as an older white queer male, we can stand together in solidarity to all sorts of events at the Capitol, and not just there, but in life itself. That his issues are my issues, that your issues are my issues, that my issues are your issues, and that we are together on the journey, all standing probably at the foot of a variety of crosses. What then can we learn from Mary, with whom we share all of these feelings and these human emotions? Mary stands at the foot of her firstborn son's executioner's cross. Some may see that Mary standing there was a passive posture. It is nothing but passive, my friends. Mary's stance at the foot of the cross is one of courage and nonviolent resistance. It is a stance of defiance, and it's an act of love. She stands for justice in the face of an incredibly unjust system that put her son on a cross. In standing there, she most likely put her own life at risk. But that wasn't her concern. Her concern was for the one who was suffering on the tree and to stand there in nonviolent opposition. Today, I stand with Mary. And I want you to stand with Mary. I stand in resistance to the systems that continue to oppress us, to violate or murder, and to stand with those who suffer, with the little girl close to the Guatemalan border. Mary stands to be present and to support. She puts her life at risk, but she knows the one who is standing with her, and that is what is significant about Mary, who stood with Mary from the very first time she heard the voice of the angel that said, "Mary, you are my chosen one," which, by the way, God and God's Spirit has said to all of us, that we are the chosen ones. Mary was never alone. She stands there, yes, with two other Marys, and potentially her son, John, or another beloved disciple. She stands not alone, but she stands in community. We stand in community. God is with us, God is in us, and we are here with each other. And I imagine there at the foot of the cross, in their solidarity, in their pain, and even in some of the fear of being hauled off themselves to a cross, that they embrace each other, that they hold each other up. In both love and anger, their anger is directed toward an unfair system that cut this 33-year-old's life short. We can't do it alone, and we aren't alone. We're never alone. So in the light of the reality that surrounds us and the beauty of the story of Mary, we may find ourselves asking, how am I called to respond? How can I use the gifts God has given me to respond? As you ponder those questions, I would say let's take Mary as our model. Let's all be Marys. Not the Mary of her youth, the meek and mild Mary, but the Mary who stands courageous and bold and steadfast. I would like to leave with this thought: the Mary who is both angry and the Mary who is both filled with love. And she knows who stands with her, community and her God. And these words from a friend of mine, Jose Harris, I would like you to really ruminate on these words during the course of the week. Some people live in a bitter, angry, hate-filled world. Some people live in a friendly, caring, love-filled world. Guess what? Same world. Perception is everything. Who you stand with is everything. Who you acknowledge as your God is everything. Some people live in a bitter, angry, hate-filled world. Some people live in a friendly, caring, love-filled world. Same world.